Welcome to our live stream. We're coming to you live from the Huckabee Theater, just outside of Nashville, where we'll be producing our show this weekend, and a lot to talk about there. We'll give a little tease of what's coming up. It's going to be a phenomenal show, jam-packed with guests like you cannot believe. Pam Case, senior producer of the show, is with me, as she always is on a Friday when we're doing our live stream, and Pam will be fielding some of the questions from you that you're going to be sending them in starting right now. Get your questions in the chat. If you want more visibility, move your question up to the top of the heap. Send us a super chat. We got moderators who are watching for your questions. They'll forward them to Pam, who will read them to me. I will answer them to you. That's how it all works. It's pretty simple, not complicated. You could have Joe Biden's brain, and you still will be able to follow along. In fact, breaking news, Biden has a brain malfunction. One of our stories today, Tucker Carlson takes a look at some January 6th footage, and a man has 7 kids with 7 different women. Maybe a clue where our society is going. We'll let you be the judge of whether we're going to a good place. Right now, Pam Case is going to be checking in on our pre-show poll to find out what you're thinking.
Oh, and a lovely tie-in, I have to say.
Good.
What animal, Governor, best represents American society today?
Ooh.
That is the question we tossed out there ahead of time.
That's an interesting one.
All right.
Sort of an open-ended question.
It is,
yeah.
Yes.
What do we end up with?
Yes. So, in fact, we've got an animal I've never heard of, Control Room crew. So I need you to what a chupacabra. Do you know what that is?
Oh, what?
Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll talk about it. A dog, a cat, a loon, or a chupacabra. Never heard of it. So let's break down the numbers. 22% say our American society today is best represented by a dog. Cat, 4%. A loon, 58%. And then the chupacabra, 16%. I'll just give credit for the folks at home that knew what that was.
That even knew what it was.
Yeah, right.
No idea.
So, well, thank you, sir. I'm glad that I wasn't by myself.
Do we have any idea?
It apparently from the Spanish chuper. What is that? I don't even understand this. I'm not even going to read all of this. It is a giant, basically, blood-sucking vampire bat. Now, this is what they're telling me in my ear.
Well, then I would move it up to 99% if that's what it is, right?
Maybe we just should have given the definition so that our audience would have known that.
I mean, I would have picked it over the loon, in fact.
Absolutely.
You know what? I would have picked the cat over the dog because the cat is finicky, sensitive, wants it just exactly like his way. Dogs are loyal. Dogs are very adaptable.
Yes, and a cat would tend to wander aimlessly.
Yes, but a cat would be very selfish and self-centered. Sorry, cat owners, but that's the way it is, and you know it. And I look at America, and that's what I see. People who are very self-centered, who want everything done their way, and if they don't get it, they just won't even so much as give you the time of day.
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity to learn a new word today, chupacabra.
I want to see if a week from now you can still say that word.
Okay, I'm not sure I can
Sometimes I'll
say
look
it
at
in
a
the
word
next
and say,
hour.
I can do it today, but next week I don't even remember what it was. Well, our favorite comment from last week's live stream is from Rick Picone. Actually, it was from 2 weeks ago because we didn't do a live stream last week.
That's right.
Rick Picone, who said, and I quote, "This administration is actually the biggest train wreck of all time." Of course, that is a reference to the train wreck that happened in East Palestine, Ohio. Yes. President Biden said he was going to go and check on those people. He still hasn't gone. We're getting close to a month now that has happened. And it has just been a real disappointing, that's the nicest word I can use, disappointing response from this administration. Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, he didn't go for several weeks. He had so many other things to do, like making sure that our bridges were diverse enough because they're so white, and that's a real problem. Our interstate highway systems are racist, so he had to check on that. And he had to make sure that his department is diverse enough. Once he got all that out of the way, he did show up for a few hours, but it did not go well. Now, I've got a question for you this week. Do you think the January 6th committee was honest in telling what happened at the Capitol that day? Please leave your answers in the chat or in the comments section below. We'll get to as many as we can over the course of today's show. Now, we always like to remind you that you need to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and be sure when you do that you hit the notification bell. That lets us tell you when we're going to be doing something like this live stream, and put your questions in the chat. The sooner you put them in, the more likely we are to get to some of yours today. And we're going to try to get to more today than we have in the past few weeks, just because we enjoy the engagement with you. I want to go through a segment here. It starts with a comment Joe Biden makes at the podium. Maybe it will make sense to you, and if it does, I hope you'll send us an interpretation. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to most of us who have tried to analyze it. Here it is.
Not let a filibuster obstruct the sacred right to vote, the right of any other right to vote from there.
I don't know what he said. Something about a filibuster keeping people in the right to vote. I don't know of anybody, I just don't, who's trying to keep people from voting. I know if people want to make sure the elections are honest, they're fair, and they follow the law. Gee, why is that such a problem? You don't want people to be able to vote after the election is over. That is a problem. It's illegal. But I don't know of anyone who says, let's try to keep people from voting. So that's a lie. It's just a lie. Now, because Joe says stuff that he mumbles through and it doesn't make sense, people are saying maybe he's too old to be president. Well, a reporter asked Jill Biden, his wife, the first lady, that question, and here was her response.
They look at what he's done, look at what he's doing, look at how physically, but how many 30-year-olds could travel to Poland, get on the train, go 9 more hours, go to Ukraine, meet with President Zelensky. His energy level, his level of passion. So look at the man, look what he's doing.
Well, that's exactly why we're concerned. We have looked at the man. We do see what he's doing. He trips up the steps rather often on Air Force One. He calls a lid on a lot of days as early as 10 o'clock in the morning, and he disappears. We don't know what he's doing. He's taken more than 40% of his time as president on vacation just in Delaware. And so when you challenge us, Joe Biden, to say, look at what he's doing, look at what he's done, I'm thinking that's exactly what worries us. What he has been doing and what he has done to this country, it does worry us. We wonder, is he asleep at the switch? How do you let that many millions of people come across the border without doing something to stop it? How is it that you let inflation continue to go? And then you get up at the podium and tell everybody that you've got it under control and you've cut the deficit in half. That's not true. How do you propose raising taxes in the midst of a potential recession and inflation raging and people can't barely pay their bills? So, yeah, we're looking at all that. Now, Nikki Haley made a comment that she thought that anybody over the age of 75, not just Joe Biden, anybody over the age of 75 running for president ought to have a cognitive test. Joe Biden's reaction to that.
Haley, one of the Republican candidates, is calling for mental competency tests for those politicians over the age of 75. What do you think about that?
Ridiculous.
Would your husband ever take one of those?
I mean, we haven't even discussed, we would never even discuss something like that.
I'm sure you wouldn't. Now, it's a legitimate question in this regard. Airline pilots have to retire at age 65. Think about that. Age 65, they have to retire. If you're an airline pilot, it doesn't matter if it's for Southwest or Delta or American or Spirit. If you're an airline pilot, when you hit 65 years old, you're out. In the National Guard, if you are a adjutant general at the age of 65, you have to retire. You might be at your peak. I think a lot of people are still quite well. I'd like to think that I am. I'm above 65. I don't think my brain has ceased to function, but there are some jobs that you cannot continue to hold because you are forced to retire at the age of 65. What this is suggesting, you wouldn't be barred from running or holding office. You would simply be given a test at 75 to see were you up to the task, both mentally and physically. And apparently that was not something that Joe Biden took to. Now, part of the reason that maybe these kind of questions get asked is because of this comment Joe Biden made this week. Listen.
and I had these terrible headaches, was diagnosed with having anyway, they had to take the top of my head off a couple times, see if I had a brain.
That's pretty bizarre. They had to take the top of my head off a couple of times to see if I had a brain. I'd love to know the answer to that question. What did they find when they took the top of your head off a couple of times? Open it up. Let's check the oil in there and see what, I don't know.
Certainly there's a report floating around with all that data.
Yeah, pop the hood and see what's up under there. I was just amazed. And I think he was trying to find the word aneurysm, because that's apparently what he had. But he couldn't find that word, so he just said, they took the top of my head off a couple of times to see if I had a brain. This next segment, this is going to go to just some of the insanity we're dealing with. This week was the International Year of the Woman, and Jill Biden had a ceremony where she presented awards for various women. And one of the people who got an award for International Woman of the Year is a biological male. Let's watch this.
In Argentina, Alba Ruada is a transgender woman who was kicked out of classrooms, barred for sitting for exams, refused job opportunities, subjected to violence, and rejected by her family. But in the face of these challenges, she worked to end violence and discrimination against the LGBTQI+ community in Argentina.
A couple of observations here. First of all, I can't keep up with the number of letters that now go into this special interest, LGBTQIA+. I mean, why don't we just say A through Z, because that's what we're getting to pretty quickly. It used to be LGBTQ, LGBT, then LGBTQ, then LGBTQ plus, and it's just, I can't keep up with it. Here's the second observation. I'm going to ask specifically women this question. Love to get your response. Please send us a response in the chat. If you're a female and the Woman of the Year is given to a biological man, is that like saying that there aren't enough like real women who would qualify for the job? So we got to go find somebody who is pretending to be a woman because there aren't enough women that qualify. I know I would feel incredibly insulted if it was said that there were not enough real men, and so we're going to find a woman to pretend to be a man so she can get the Man of the Year award. Pam, how does that strike you?
Well, I'm offended by it.
Yeah.
So, it just is. I don't know how we got here. We have, and I don't see anything changing. That's the toughest part.
We should not pretend this is normal.
It's not normal.
We should not pretend that this is okay.
As I recall your daughter saying in her response, her Republican response after State of the Union.
Yeah.
I mean, crazy.
It is crazy.
It's where we are.
But, we're so afraid that we'll offend somebody by saying, hey, this is crazy. I think it's time we just say, this is crazy. Let's quit pretending that this is okay and that this is normal, because it is not normal and it is not okay. If a person is that confused about his or her gender, I feel for them. I hope we can help them, get them some counseling. And if they want to live that way, that's fine. But let's not reward it. My gosh, let's not say that, okay, you're a biological male. You can go and compete in weightlifting competition with females. Guess what? You're going to win every doggone time. This is, again, it's beyond me. Okay. One more clip here, and then we're going to go to some of your questions. This is Joe Biden this week saying that nobody making no one making under $400,000 a year will be paying any more in new taxes. That's not true, but he actually did say it.
I made a commitment on my watch. No one making under $400,000 will pay an additional penny in taxes.
But they will. In fact, they already are. If you're making $20,000 a year, you are already paying more taxes under Biden's plan already. If he raises the taxes that he's talking about, we're talking a multi-trillion-dollar tax increase. See, here's what he is saying. He's going after the billionaires. Here's a reality. Billionaires have a building filled with accountants and lawyers. They know the tax code better than the IRS. That's what they get paid to do. They find ways not to evade taxes, that's illegal, but to avoid taxes, that's very legal. And so they will figure out a way. Now, if you are an Uber driver, you can't hire that kind of high-priced CPA or tax attorney. So you will be paying the tax. You say, well, they don't make $400,000 a year. Believe me, people in the gig economy, people throughout the working class will end up paying the taxes. And one of the big lies that Democrats tell, not just Joe, most of the Democrats, we're going to hit these big corporations. We're going to make them pay, quote, their fair share. I try to remind people, corporations do not pay taxes. Now, lest you think I'm saying, oh, yes, they do. They have to pay. Here's what I'm saying. They collect tax. They send money into the IRS in the form of what looks to be a tax. But when they are assessed a tax and it becomes a part of the cost of doing business, what they do, they build that into the cost of the goods or the services that you buy from them. So they ultimately aren't paying it. You are, if you're the consumer. If you buy a pair of shoes and the company had to pay taxes on the shoes that amount to $3 a pair, that pair of shoes is going to cost $3 or more so that you, not the shoe company, will absorb the $3 tax. That's just how business works. So anybody who says, we're going to hit these big companies hard, these oil companies, these pharmaceutical companies, hit them hard as you want, because it won't hurt them. They will simply add what it costs them to do business, which includes their taxes. They will add it to the cost of what they're selling you, and you will end up paying those taxes. So please, if you are foolish enough to think, and I'm sorry to be so blunt, but if you are foolish enough to think that big companies are the ones absorbing tax increases like Joe Biden's talking about, I can't help you. I just can't. Okay, I bet we have some questions coming in. Let's see what we got.
We do indeed. In fact, Stephanie Ellis, a super chat question, so it brought hers to the top of the heap. She's asking, Gov, I've been seeing polls that say that most people would vote for Biden over Trump. Do you think that people are really that foolish, or is it that they are afraid to support Trump publicly?
Wow, I don't know. You know, only 37% of Democrats want Joe Biden to run again. So I find that poll hard to believe. I'm sure there is one that says that. I'm not disputing that. But I'm disputing how accurate it is if 37% of Democrats are the highest number he has within his own party of people who want him to run. Now, maybe the question is posed, do you want Donald Trump, who's about to be indicted by the New York prosecutor? And how do I know how it was worded? But I have a hard time believing that in light of the two presidential administrations that people would still pick Joe Biden over Donald Trump. I know people are turned off by some of Donald Trump's tweets and comments and all of that. But I long to have Donald Trump back in the White House because, you know, I know exactly that he's going to do what he says and he's going to say what he will do. And he will do things that will be for the benefit of the country. We had the lowest number of unemployment among black people under Donald Trump than ever in American history, ever. We had the highest number of people who were working. We had the most energy independence we've had in 75 years. We were actually exporting energy. It was cheap and affordable, and people could access it at all ends of the economic spectrum. I could go on through the list. That matters to me a little more than something he tweets. So,
all right, we've got a question this afternoon from Jay Bailey. Governor, what was Mitch McConnell thinking attacking Tucker and Fox? The videos speak for themselves. What are your thoughts?
I was shocked that McConnell found such reaction to the fact that this was airing. Now, the one point I had a little disagreement with Tucker on was that Tucker almost painted it as if he ignored the fact that there was, in fact, a riot. He did show us video that we'd never seen before and needed to see, like the so-called QAnon shaman who was being escorted around the Capitol by Capitol police officers, none of whom stopped him. At one point, I think there were 13 different police officers that he encountered. None of them said, hey, you can't go there. They were basically waving him in, and they never showed him doing anything violent or destructive. Now, it was stupid of him to go sit in the chair of the Senate president, and it was some dumb things people did. But he's in prison for 4 years over that, and I'm not sure that makes any sense. Especially what I think is troubling is when we found out that his defense lawyers were never allowed to see that video. Now, here's what that means. The Department of Justice, in prosecuting this guy, failed to provide exculpatory evidence to the defense. That is an unconstitutional violation of this guy's basic rights. He has a right to see all the evidence that could be used against him and any evidence that might help him that the prosecutors have. They clearly didn't have that. I think this guy's going to get out. I think he will end up suing the government for malicious prosecution. And depending on if we have a judge who actually has read the Constitution, this guy's going to win.
Because he pled guilty, will that make it harder for him to get out?
Because his defense team was never given the evidence, I don't think it'll matter as much as that even his defense team were totally kept in the dark by the Department of Justice. So that's what constitutes more of a malicious prosecution when you say, yeah, here's what we have on you, but they don't give the full story.
Right, and as more and more evidence are made public, then that push is going to be in there for him to get out.
Here, let me finish this one thought. I think Tucker should have been more balanced because he said it was like a sightseeing tour. Okay, for most of the people there that day, it probably was. But let's not minimize. There were people who broke glass, who burst through barricades, who vandalized offices and hallways, and they did things that were, in fact, criminal. You cannot dismiss that. So I don't want to dismiss it. I don't want to be like that CNN reporter who said, well, here we are with mostly peaceful protests, and there were explosions and fires going off right behind him. It was bizarre. So Tucker, I think, should have been a little bit more balanced in presenting that there were riots, there were people who were doing criminal activity, but it was not the overwhelming edited version that the January 6th committee showed.
Well, I'm sure David Indiana, in his comment here, kind of captures what a lot of people think. When has the January 6th committee been honest about anything?
Never.
So that's,
yeah. I mean, they haven't. And I think Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, the two so-called, I call them the Pelosi Republicans, because she handpicked them and they were more than willing to serve because they hate Trump so much. But they're disgusting and despicable. And I'm glad Liz Cheney was overwhelmingly defeated in her congressional race. And guess where Adam Kinzinger ended up? On CNN. Wow, what a shock. They found them a Republican that they could count on to trash the Republican Party. And there he is, getting a paycheck for doing it. What I find really troubling is that the January 6th committee has never been held accountable for it not being a legitimate hearing. They hired a very slick news producer from ABC, and he put together all this tape in a very highly edited, and now we find out, not just edited, but enhanced. All the crowd noises and things that you heard, that was not on the original. They edited that in because the video surveillance didn't have audio. So that's not just maybe out of context. That is truly a lie.
right. They've added dramatic effect.
Yeah. It's like adding the movie score to a movie. Yes, it creates the effect, but was there music playing on Normandy Beach in the opening scenes of Saving Private Ryan? No. They add that for effect. So this was not a hearing, it was a TV show. Let's never forget that.
Yeah. All right, got a personal question for you. That's being asked by Patricia today.
Okay.
Sarah stated that you and Grandma babysit for free.
Yeah.
How long have you two been doing that? I figure it's easier with family when work hours can get rough. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine charging my children to babysit my grandchildren. I'd probably pay them in order to babysit the grandkids and have them come over, but don't tell them that because they'll want me to start paying them. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks for that personal
perfectly normal
insight.
thing, yeah.
Bob B. is asking, Governor, what do you think about the president of Mexico saying that they do not make fentanyl there and will encourage Mexicans living here in America to not vote for the GOP candidate?
I think that'd be all the more reason to vote for the GOP candidates. If the president of Mexico, who is allowing the human trafficking of 7- and 8-year-old girls to become sex slaves, if he thinks that's okay, and he doesn't mind his border becoming an open sieve where people are pouring in, bringing enough fentanyl to kill the United States population many times over, and that did kill 100,000 Americans last year, if he thinks that's okay, but he's telling us not to vote for Republicans, and by gosh, you better vote for Republicans unless you think that guy is looking after you, which he most certainly is not. All right, we're going to go to this. We were talking about January 6th. Good point to bring this up. This is fascinating in that when Tucker Carlson aired just little pieces of what was over 40,000 hours of tape, this was the guy that got thrown in jail for 4 years. I wanted you to watch just a little clip of this.
Today, there is dispute over how Chansley got into the Capitol building. But according to our review of the internal surveillance video, it is very clear what happened once he got inside. Virtually every moment of his time inside the Capitol was caught on tape. The tapes show that Capitol Police never stopped Jacob Chansley. They helped him. They acted as his tour guides.
Yeah, now, whether they were his tour guides or they just sort of let him roam, they claimed later that it was to keep the situation from escalating. They thought if they tried to stop him. But, you know, that's like saying we don't want to escalate a bank robbery. We're going to let the guy go ahead and rob the bank, and we'll deal with it a few months from now. I don't buy that. I don't buy it at all. Because if you're supposed to guard the Capitol and somebody's walking around that isn't supposed to be there, you should at least verbally say, sir, I'm sorry, you can't go any further than this door right here. You've got to stop, turn around, and go out. Then if he fought them, okay, arrest him. But they're just walking around with him. So something doesn't add up here. It just doesn't. And why they would put this guy away for 4 years, when you look at the total context of it, it's very difficult to really understand it. Okay, I want to go to a question or two, and then I've got a segment that you will not believe. It's about a gentleman who is, I guess he's trying to be the father of our country. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what questions have we got coming?
All right, Purple Haze is asking this afternoon, Gov, how can people who take an oath to uphold the Constitution and the Bill of Rights try to ban the press from reporting?
I think it's because I'm not sure some of these people have ever read the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. And if they have, their political interests now outweigh their adherence to the Constitution, which is tragic because they violated their oath and they've made a mockery of everything that we should believe in the Constitution.
Okay, Joy Bartlett, going back to January 6th, who actually did damage to the Capitol? Was it the FBI or the ones that were ushered in?
Well, I mean, I think you have to believe that a lot of the people who broke the windows and ran through those barricades and who hurled flagpoles and various things, you know, they were protesters. You just can't say, oh, none of those people, they were all behaving beautifully. No, they weren't. There were some people who acted like thugs and who did criminal actions. I think they got overheated. I think they were people who got all hepped up and went and did it. But there's a couple of observations. Number one, they did not represent the apparently several 100,000 people that made it to Washington that day. And number two, Donald Trump didn't tell them to do that. It's not his fault they did it. If in fact what some of them did was a violation of the law, it violated when he told them from the podium, peacefully protest. And some of that wasn't peaceful. So were there government agents there? I'm convinced there were. I still want to know who this Ray Epps guy is. I want to know, how come he didn't get arrested? Right. He was on the FBI most wanted list one day, and then quietly that just went away. He went and talked to the January 6th committee, and supposedly when he got finished, they were all fine with it, even though he lied to them. He told them that he had sent a text to his nephew at 2:12 p.m. and said, I'm on my way back to the hotel, but I orchestrated the going into the Capitol. I orchestrated it. He said he left the Capitol at 2:12. At 2:41, the video that we saw this week showed that he was not only at the Capitol, he was still in the middle of stuff. And this idea that he wasn't there, we're seeing it on the screens now, there he is. And this was at 2:41 in the afternoon. So he lied to the committee by saying he had left. No, he hadn't. He was still there. Right. Why did they let him off the hook? Was he a Fed? I don't personally know the answer to that question. I have to kind of guess that either he was or he was an informant. Something doesn't add up there. Other people went to jail for less than what this guy did when he was yelling into the microphone the day before saying, we've got to go into the Capitol. That's right, in the Capitol. So he is inciting a whole lot more of a riot than Donald Trump ever did. Nobody's going after him. So what gives? Yeah. We need to know. All right, we got to get to this story. There is a gentleman. I know he's not a gentleman. He is a male. That's all I can say about him. He is a male. This is a TikTok video. He is boasting of the fact that he has 7 children with 7 different women. You would think that he would want to maybe express his love for his children, his love for the 7 various women. But I think you might be surprised to find out his attitude about the whole thing.
Calling me a deadbeat because I tell them I was being irresponsible yet not wearing protection. But I always tell these women that I got pregnant that I do not want to be a father to these children. And I offer to pay for the abortion. Majority of times they'll either take the abortion or they'll take a plan B. But only these 7 have kept these children. But the crazy thing about it is they want me to be responsible for some children I told them I did not want.
This may be the most bizarre video I've seen in a long time. This guy says, no, some people may call me a deadbeat. That'd be about the nicest thing I could call this guy. He doesn't deserve the title of a mere deadbeat. He's a dead-brained idiot. First of all, he boasts that he had sex with women, didn't take any protection because he figured he'd pay for the abortion or pay for the Plan B pill. And if they didn't go for either of those options, then he didn't feel any responsibility for having impregnated that woman and being responsible for the creation of a human life. It's her problem. Let's watch the second part of this. It's just about as bizarre.
I don't even have no type of love for these women. How do they expect me to love these children? Before y'all say, oh, he irresponsible, he a deadbeat, he don't take accountability. Yeah, I do. I just don't give a f. You ain't gonna force these children on me when I told you I ain't want them.
The only thing I guess I can admire about this guy is his just brutal honesty. He said, I don't love these women, so why would I love their children? Because I didn't know their children. This is really, to me, a symptom of a very sick culture, that a person would treat women as a mere object for his own sexual pleasure, and when the consequences of his sexual activity is a pregnancy, his attitude is, not my problem. Well, it is your problem, pal. It is definitely something that you are responsible for, but you're responsible for something far worse than the birth of 7 children that you don't love. And that's you're responsible for helping bring our culture to a point where hell is beginning to look a lot more palatable than I ever thought it could. You're bringing hell on earth with this kind of selfish, disgusting, sick, perverted behavior and attitude. Sir, you're not just a deadbeat. You're far worse than that. And I can't say it even on a live stream that's in a closed circuit. I just cannot. But I'm thinking it. Okay. One final thing. There is racism, certainly, in some people. I don't know of anyone, I really don't, who I would consider to be a racist. There have been some in my past I've known that were racist. But I don't associate with anyone who is, and I hate racism. But I hate people who pretend that racism is places it isn't. And here is a young lady who apparently thinks that pretty much if you're white, you're a racist.
I'm saying that as a white person, you uphold a system of racism by literally just being white. I believe if you're not spending your literal entire life dismantling racism, then you're contributing to its continuation. Racism refers to power and race. If you are the powerful race in a society, then you're racist. Like, I just don't understand why it's so taboo. Let's talk about it. Let's accept it so that we can work towards changing it. We're never going to get anywhere if people won't just acknowledge it in the first place.
That's just insane. Her attitude is that if you are a white person you're a racist, period. You're a racist because you're white. And somehow you're making it impossible for people of color to be able to succeed. Can I just point out something? In 2008, I ran for president. So did Barack Obama. He was black, I'm white. He won, I didn't. If it was all about race, how come I didn't win? Looks like I would have won, right? How could a black man win the presidency when all those white people were running? Because it wasn't an issue of race, just to break it down to you.